Morning. Hope you're doing well this morning. Thanks for being here. My name's Ryan, one of the pastors here on staff. And if we haven't met, love to meet you. Maybe hear how you made your way to the campus today. And just want to say thanks for being here. And I want to tell you about something that's coming up here in a few weeks. We are looking at offering a baptism class here in just a few weeks. If you've never been baptized before, you've never kind of taken that step, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is a big deal. And it's something Jesus asked us to do. And it's a pretty life-changing step to take, right? It doesn't change our standing with God per se, but it helps us to kind of go public in our faith. And if you've maybe been in church for a little bit or maybe a long, long time, and I know sometimes that can get away from us and never actually follow through with getting that done. If you've never been baptized, highly encourage you, just jump into that class. It's a 1-hour class, super easy to take. And you're going to learn a little bit about what the process looks like. You're not committing necessarily to get baptized, just to kind of understand what it is. So that's just coming up here in a few weeks. So sign up for that. And I think you'll be glad just to understand kind of what it means and kind of how it works here at Grace. Getting baptized and looking at that baptism class. We started a series a bunch of weeks ago now that we're going to wrap up today called Last Words. And I think this has been an important series. We've been really looking at some of the last things that Jesus said before he faced the cross and then ultimately before he left the planet. And we've been looking at those kind of one or two things at a time that Jesus has said. And one of the things that we said is Jesus was incredibly intentional kind of with how he lived, period. But certainly in those last moments when he was facing the end and trying to transfer his passion and his values and his vision, especially to his followers, I think some really important things came out of his mouth in those last words. We've been taking a look at those. And if you've missed any of those conversations, maybe this is your first or second time here, you can catch up if you want to on the website or on our YouTube channel. Watch those anytime if you want to. I think you'll be glad that you did. And today we're going to wrap that up and look at really the last recorded thing that we see Jesus saying before what the Bible calls it, he ascends to heaven. Jesus went after he rose from the dead, and he would kind of rise into the air. And right now, today, Jesus is alive and well. He's at the right hand of God the Father, and he is continuing to pray or intercede for us today. So Jesus isn't dead. He is alive. And but before he left the planet, he said this last thing that we really want to dial into. And really what he said is in response to a question that his disciples asked him. And I always find it super fascinating to watch how Jesus answers questions. Often he doesn't really answer them. He kind of gives a perspective or asks another question, but it's very rare that he directly answers that question. And that's going to be true this time too. Here's what we see in the book of Acts. If you have a Bible, you can go ahead and turn there with me to Acts chapter 1. We're going to be in verse 6. And if you don't have a Bible with you and you want one, man, love for you to take one. You can grab one from right underneath the chairs there. Make that your own. Make that our gift to you. Write your name in it, draw in it, right? Highlight, make notes, whatever you want to do. But love for you to have a copy of God's Word. As you're making your way to Acts chapter 1, we look at it here on the screen as well. Here's what the disciples would have asked. It says, then they gathered around him. This is Jesus risen from the dead. And they asked him this. They said, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Lord, at this time you're going to restore to the kingdom of Israel. At first glance, this may not seem like much, but this is a pretty loaded question. It's a pretty loaded question. And remember, the disciples at this point, they've gone on a journey at this point, right? They followed this rabbi, this teacher, this leader, Jesus, and before he went to the cross, they would have been a part of this movement that they thought, this thing is amazing, and it is moving, and it is gaining momentum, and it seems like Jesus, he keeps talking about this kingdom. He's going to be in power soon, which means we're going to be in power soon because we're kind of on the ground floor of this thing. Right, so they would have thought their trajectory was going that way. Then, of course, we know about the cross. Jesus is crucified. Their hopes are dashed. Then he gets up from the dead. They're like, here we go again, right? We're back on the train. Now power is coming to us again. When's the power, the kingdom, the reign of God going to be restored to Israel. And really, we can look at least two things that's being asked here by the disciples. They're asking, when is the power coming? And in essence, they're asking this: when is our suffering, our humiliation gonna stop? Well, when's the end coming? When is the end of our suffering gonna happen? When do we get to stop doing this, right? As a human being, we all kind of ask that question. How long do I have to do X? How long do I have to do this? And what I think is fascinating is human beings, we tend to speculate and wonder and conjecture about what the end might look like and when it might be coming. It's just a natural tendency that we have. And certainly the disciples are doing that here. They're saying, hey, when are we going to be there? When is it coming? When is the suffering going to end? But then they're not asking about that in a general way. They're asking that in a specific way. Lord, are you at this time, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Are you going to put our people, our family, our nation, our friend group, our little huddle, are you going to put us in power like we've always dreamt of being in power? When's it going to end? When's the suffering to stop? And when's it going to end really for my people, for me, for my family, for my nation? They're fair questions. They're good questions. But I love the way that Jesus begins to interact with them. Look at what he says. The next couple of verses here in 7 and 8, he said to them, "It's not for you to know the times or the dates the Father has set by his own authority." Let me just stop there. It's not for you to spend your time and your energy worrying, thinking about, speculating about, dreaming about when exactly that's all going to play out, and focusing on all this stuff you can't control. He says that, in essence, that's the Father's problem. The when exactly is his problem, right? So he's kind of looking at his disciples, his followers, saying, put away your timelines and your charts, chill out a little bit about your end times mania. And I want you instead, he says this next verse, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. He says, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. He says, what I want you to realize is power is coming to you. The Holy Spirit's going to be gifted to you, given to you. And it's amazing to read. We don't have time to go into all of it today, but read the rest of Acts 1 and chapter 2, right? 1 and 2 of Acts. And it's an amazing story of how God pours out his presence in a supernatural way to his people. And in doing that, he's saying, hey, something is starting here. In many ways, the church is being born here. And I want you to know that I am with you, and I'm going to live in you. Jesus talked about this before he left the planet. He said it's going to be better if the Spirit comes. Now it's happening. That all is playing out. And he says, when that happens, you will be my witnesses. And he talks about all of these different places, Jerusalem and Judea, and right into the ends of the earth. So in essence, he says this, and I think this is an important message for us to grab hold of today. He's calling us and focusing us on the reality that we're going to be doing the work of witnessing, of telling people about Jesus. And I think he knows this about us as he's God, right? He knows how we function, that it's always easier to speculate than to get to work. Isn't that true? It's always easier to speculate. And I have never, in my life at least, had a period of time where I have been more compelled to speculate than in the last 2.5 years. Right? When is COVID going to end? It's 2 weeks, right? And then it says the thing's over, right? And then what about, is there a war? And what's going to happen in the government? And when is this going to happen? And who's going to be elected? And what's all the things out there? And how is it all going to work? And your imagination can run wild. And I think the Lord would say, there's stuff out there for days that we could focus on. Instead, put your heart and your mind on the reality of what I'm doing, on the reality of how I'm going to work in you and how I'm going to work through you. That would have been true of the disciples, and I believe that is true of us. Right? It's always easier to speculate than to get to work. It's easier to get swept away in the dreaming and the talking and the discussing and the fantasizing of how the end may play out or how this thing may happen. And never, at least in my opinion, at least in my lifetime, have I seen the need to simply focus on what is before us and to do the good that God has called us to do. Right? And as we put our faith in that, watch how God plays it out. Right? But Jesus tells us in this passage, right? He says, you're going to receive power. And then he says, you will be my witnesses. You will. I want us just to catch that for a minute. You will be my witnesses. What's a witness? All right, a witness is a person who sees something important or amazing, right? In the biblical world, that's what a witness would be. Somebody that like captures and sees this amazing thing happen, or this very important, critical thing that is played out, right? You are somebody that has been captured or captivated by this event that has taken place. And now, because I've witnessed that, there's a responsibility to do something with it, to bear witness. I was thinking about this the other day. My mom and my stepdad got married when I was I think I was 10, right? So I was probably about 11 or so. And I remember this memory so vividly that his mom lived on the lake. So we were out by the lake, Portage Lakes area, right? It's where I grew up. And we were out by the seawall, and we had a little boat. And they had this boat that we were working on. And my new stepdad, right, kind of building this new relationship. And I remember watching him work on this boat. And he had this idea that he was going to take a rope and tie it to the end of the boat. And he took it up through the handle, this open-ended handle of a rope swing. And then he took it down to, the little thing that goes into the seawall that you tie the boat off to. He takes it through that, and he's like, I'm going to make this awesome pulley system, and I'm going to pull on this rope and pull the boat up enough that I can tie it off and we can work on it, right, and get up under it. I said, brilliant idea. This is amazing, right? So it was a fascinated 10-year-old kid watching my new stepdad, do this thing. And as he starts pulling on it, it's working, right? The boat's starting to lift up out of the water. And I'm like, this is awesome. I love this, right? And he's pulling on it, and he's pulling, and then all of a sudden, right, the little thing pops up out of the seawall, bangs him in the head, right? And I'm just like, as soon as he just flies backwards. And then I'm watching, right, dumbfounded, and then just blood starts pouring out of his face. I'm like, I'm going to die. I don't know what's happening right now, right? And he just looks at me. He kind of half almost, you ever see somebody get hit hard and they get that woozy, woo, get their bell rung. And they start falling down a little bit. And he sat down kind of involuntarily. And then he's like, go get your mom, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm running and I'm about passed out. All the blood is run out of my face. And I go and I look at mom and I'm like, Dad's hurt. He needs help now, and that's about all I had in me. She goes out, gets him a thing, gets some stitches. He's good, right? And it all worked out. But in the moment, I witnessed this important thing happen, right? I'm responsible now to do something with that. If I don't do my job of bearing witness to this event that I've just encountered, bad things are going to happen to him, right? Certainly in that situation. Often in the Bible, it's not necessarily a negative event that's taking place, but it's an important one. That if I've been entrusted with the witnessing of an amazing or an important event, that now I'm responsible for doing something with that event. I'm responsible to bear witness for it and with it. And this is what Jesus was talking about. And Jesus, as he said this to the disciples, they certainly would have understood that, and they would have heard it, though, differently than we hear it today. For sure, they would have heard it differently. Because when I hear Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth, like I hear them as like a list of random places. I don't know how you hear those cities. If you have a map in your head of how, I've even been to Israel, and I like know where these places are, and they still kind of sound like a random bunch of places. But for the disciples, as they heard Jerusalem, and they heard Judea and Samaria, and they heard ends of the earth, they did not hear random places. That is not what was going on in their head, for sure. See, what had happened was they had an encounter. They had witnessed the life and the ministry and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They were marked by him, changed by him. And that group of people now, they were responsible for that. But then they had to take that message, that event that they've now encountered, and what he said is, he said, you will be my witnesses. And I want us to catch this. It took me a while to see this. As first, probably 15 or 20 times I've read this as a follower of Jesus, I didn't see it. But then I recognized that when Jesus said, you will be my witnesses, he wasn't given a command. He was stating a reality. He was prophesying. He was saying what was going to happen. When the Spirit comes on you, when he's given to you, you're going to have the boldness and the courage to go bear witness to what you have seen and heard. To me, this is what's going to happen. And that's going to happen. And that's going to happen first, right, in Jerusalem. And they would have heard that as some version of our people. Our people. Jerusalem would have been the center point of Jewish culture. It's where the power people were. It's where Jesus was crucified. And the disciples certainly would have had some familiarity by the people there. They would have definitely known they're Jewish. And when Jesus says, hey, I want you to take me and I want you to own me in front of them, I want you to say, I'm with him in front of the people that wanted him to be crucified. They didn't just hear in Jerusalem as some random city. They heard, oh wow, you want us to go public in our ownership of following you. These are people that when Jesus died, they went and hid in a locked room, right? Which is exactly what I would have done, right? Probably you too. They were not looking to go be crucified too. They knew when they heard in Jerusalem that was going to come with mockery, ostracism, social rejection for sure, maybe even physical harm. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem. They heard that in front of our people that we are in conflict with right now, in our nation, in our family, our people. And they would have felt the weight of all of that coming together in a way that was public. That we got to own Jesus here in this space. And Jesus talked about this. Here's what he said. Right? He said, when talking about himself and his own hometown, he said they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. He understood and recognized and experienced when he went to do miracles in his own hometown with his own people that he would face rejection there and that there would be little faith in that space. And of course, he knew that some of that was going to happen when he took the message there. Massive. Jesus would say this right before he went to the cross. Far before, he would say, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. He's saying, I want you guys, he's preparing them as he sent them out on missions to own him, to claim him. To, no matter what circle we find ourselves in, to look and say, I'm with Jesus. I'm with that guy, regardless of the cost. He didn't stop there, right? He continues and says, in all Judea and Samaria. And Judea would have been kind of the surrounding area of Israel, and they would have known that area well. And they would have been from some of those places. But the idea of Samaria would have been extraordinarily challenging, right? Samaria would be other people, those people. They would have been half Jewish people that Jewish people would have viewed and despised. They had prejudice against them, and actually for some decent reasons. The Samaritan people would have drawn the Jewish people away from the faith many generations before, and they would have been viewed as half-breeds from a group of people that very much viewed themselves as a pure-blooded people, and they would have not wanted to associate with them, certainly, and they would have had a deep prejudice against them. When they heard Samaria, they would have thought, you want us to go love and connect with and bear witness to them? Really? Those people? Because here's the thing, guys, this is amazing to me. When the first disciples heard, when they heard this, right, when Jesus rose from the dead and he's talking to his disciples, they had no idea that this was going to be a global movement that affected people all over the world. They were still dialed in to the same things that we tend to be dialed into, which is my family, my tribe, my group, my little clan here. Right? And just like us, we tend to think that way. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Jesus is going to take their vision and expand it like crazy and say, I want you to love people and own me in front of people that you frankly would like to never be around again. People that you would have despised. And what he starts to help them to see is that he did this on purpose. Here's what Jesus said in John 10, 14 through 16. He says, I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. He says, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Here's the sentence I want you to catch. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. So Jesus is saying, he's saying, hey, this is not just about you. I've got other people out here that I want to scoop in, and my love and my forgiveness and my leadership is available to them, not just to you. In fact, what they failed to understand is that the whole reason the Jewish people were given such amazing miracles and amazing access to the words of God and the tabernacle and all the stuff of the Old Testament was that they might take what was given to them and then give it to the people around them, to be a light to the world. It's the whole heartbeat. When they heard Samaria, they would have been a little bit disgusted. And certainly when they heard ends of the earth, somewhere out there to the Gentiles, to the people not just with half Jewish blood, but people that have no Jewish blood. Those people, right, out there in some other place that's probably far away from our people. Those people, they would have known the Gentiles and thought of them from childhood as dogs. Go tell the dogs about me. Bear witness to them out of love and passion for them, just as I have come out of love and passion for you. Because I can't even capture how radical this would have sounded to them. The rest of the book of Acts, read it sometime. It's amazing because this is exactly what would play out. The disciples would, through a supernatural set of events, would be moved to begin to share Jesus and bear witness to him to all kinds of people. And they slowly but surely, just like we do, they slowly but surely began to put the pieces together that this message isn't just for us. It's not just so our people can be in power. It's not just so our nation can be dominant. It's not just so our kids can be safe. This message was entrusted to us, and we are now people that bear witness. Because for followers of Jesus, right, even 2,000 years later, you and I have been impacted by the person of Jesus if you're a follower of Christ today. That's the reality. And if you haven't, please understand, if you haven't been impacted by Jesus, but you've been in the church for a long time, you don't have salvation. I love you. I want you to find it, but you don't know Jesus today. You might be religious. You might be a neat person, but you don't have a relationship with the Jesus who's alive today. I want you to find that. What Jesus was starting the day that he left this planet permanently, at least until he comes back at the end, is he was starting something that would alter the planet permanently. And it would stretch the people that were charged with bearing witness, challenge them at the deepest levels. Here's what he was driving at that we would conclude as the church continued to move forward. And look at this passage. Galatians 3:28, therefore there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. When the Apostle Paul, who's a Jewish man who would have very much thought this way before he came to know Christ, for him to say that was absolutely revolutionary. And he wasn't saying that Jews and Gentiles are the same. That's the whole point. He was saying they're so radically different, but they're united in Jesus. So slaves and free are not the same. They're radically different. They're in a different place, yet they're united in Jesus. Men and women, they're radically different creatures and united in the person of Christ. And here's what he was getting at. Here's the toughest part. Here's what this does to us and why it's so important, is the message of Jesus that, that you and I have been marked and changed and altered and have been radically reoriented by the person of Jesus. What that's going to do is that's going to get down into us at super deep, challenging levels and challenge our prejudices, challenge the ways that we divide against each other. And what we start to own is that verse right there in all kinds of ways that we tend to separate ourselves. We don't think Jew and Gentile today. We might think rich or poor, right? We might think educated or uneducated. this zip code or that zip code, this color or that color. You dress like this, I dress like. And there's things that bother us about each other or people who are those people out there, quote unquote. They don't look the way that I look, or they don't vote the way that I vote. And what Jesus is saying is all of those differences, all of them, are erased when it comes to our unity around the person of Christ. So you're saying, I'm because of Jesus, you want me to love people who are far on the right? Yep. What about people that are far? You want me to love people far on the left? Yep. You want me to love people that are I think are insane about their views of? Yep. Yep. That's what he's saying. This is why standing there, I'm positive the disciples didn't take it all in, but they were rocked by it, like hearing, I'm going to end up loving all kinds of people all over the planet in all kinds of ways, challenged everything that they believed and everything they were taught growing up in the super dark places that tend to divide us. Jesus knew that. And he knew when they heard those words that it would take, the book of Acts plays out over about a 30-year period. They were starting to scratch the surface, I think, about that time. And for the rest of us, for the last 2,000 years, we're starting to scratch the surface too. See, this is why this is so critical, right? When Jesus says, I want you to bear witness in all these places, he's saying, I want you to be identified with me more than you're identified with any other potential circle. Right? This is what baptism is all about. When we get baptized, what we're saying is this. There's a reason why we hold back on not getting baptized. There is. Because I know, and you know, right? As soon as I say, I'm going public with this thing, I'm out there, right? And then we're going to make a video and capture your story. And maybe somebody at work sees that story and they know I'm a follower of Jesus. And my two worlds that I thought were super separate just came crashing together. And that's scary and that's painful. And Jesus is like, yeah, yes. That person on my sports team, they're going to find out that I'm a follower of Jesus, and then the whole thing's going to be broken. Right. Jesus is like, I want to show up, and I want you to bear witness wherever you find yourself. Well, that might cost me something. That might be painful. I don't like those people. They're weird. Man, there's some weird people. I'm one of them. I'm one of the weirdest people you know, right? But there's people that are weird that in other ways that I'm not, that I think, man, I don't really like to be around you that much. Jesus is like, I'm going to change your heart. I'm going to give you power through the Spirit. You're going to love those people, and you're going to show up in these different ways. I will change you from the inside out and help you to bear witness. Guys, this is the crazy part. This is the way that the gospel got all the way here. Right? Here's the thing. The church has always been meant to be a movement. The church was never meant to be an organization that is focused on its own survival and managing and taking care of its own traditions. How did the church get to us? People that look different than you and I, almost guaranteed, loved other people who looked different from them, and they bore witness to them, and they loved them, and they treated them like family. And over 2,000 years, somehow the gospel got down here to Akron, Ohio, deep in Gentileville. That's where you and I live, right? Deep down in here. And because people have been faithful, just as Jesus promised, by the way, we got to hear the great news that there's a Savior who bled for me, who died for me, and who offers to forgive me of everything I've ever done. Now, the question is, what will I do with that movement as it's now come to me? And the temptation is always to go back and make it about our people, to hoard it, to close the ranks, to make sure they don't get in on this out of fear and protection and isolation, to stop it, to clog it. But I have great faith because Jesus promised that we will be his witnesses, that his Spirit will give us the courage to continue to be the church that he builds and he mobilizes. Because at Grace Church, we're not starting a movement. That's ridiculous. We are a part of a movement that has existed for 2,000 years. And will continue until Jesus came back. Now here's the question, guys, and I just want us to make sure we're capturing this fully. Right? Because some of us are like, Ryan, man, this is pretty intense. Right? I hear you. I love you. But I can't, in good faith, look at you and say that what we're doing here, what we do every weekend, and what we're doing through Grace Church is just trying to help people feel good. That's not what we're doing. We're not a feel-good factory. We don't just offer motivation. We don't offer good religious vibes. What we offer is a clear pathway for individuals to find what we have found, which is a Savior who loves you and died for you and will continue to love and lead you. If that's what you want in on, then you're in the right place. If you have no interest in that, I'm glad you're here again. But just know this is what we're a part of. The greatest movement that has ever existed, because it exists to multiply life and forgiveness and peace and hope to all who receive it. And then through those who receive it, they have the joy of multiplying that to other people. If you want in on that, you're thinking about being a part of the church the right way. Can you see why this is one of the last things that Jesus would say? Why he would make sure it was super clear that this isn't just for us. This is for the world. And that we have the great joy of being a part of it. Guys, as the band comes up, would you wrestle with this? The reality of what Jesus promised and our role in it today. Lord, our question is, will I grab hold of the courage and the power and the love that God offers to love people here and to be stretched to love people here and go all the way to the ends of the earth, if necessary, to bear witness to the great God who loved me? Would you bow your heads, close your eyes with me? Lord, the plan that you left us with was this one. The church and the message of Christ is the hope of the world. All right, I pray that you would help me through your Spirit to believe that. Not just in word, Lord, but in the way that I love, in the way that I prioritize my life. God, I pray that for each and every one of us, that you would cause us to be struck by the great vision that you have for us and how you want to use our lives to impact and to reach the world for you. God, help us to walk away different today. Meet us here, even now.